If AfterSight podcasts are part of your week, donate today at aftersight.org/donate. AfterSight is a nonprofit, and your support keeps these programs on the air and expands access for people who are blind, have low vision, or need other access to print. Be the reason someone discovers AfterSight this week.
Hello, this is Kim Wardlow. I am your host for Navigating Life with Vision Loss. Welcome back. We are almost at the halfway mark of our series on sports. So we've been covering different things. It's just been a whole variety of sports. So if you have not caught the first episodes, please go back and do that. You can pick based on topics of your interest, or maybe you'll find something new that is of interest to you. But today we are going to be talking about going to the gym, fitness there, strength training, safety in the gym, simple basics. Especially this one, we have shows, some are focused on extreme sports and really high level activity of folks that are at that level. And this show is really talking about getting started and some basics. So I want to welcome Evan Schwabrock. Am I saying your name correctly?
That was very good, yeah.
Okay. I realized I should have asked you that before we hit record, but that's okay. As long as I'm saying it correctly. Evan is the founder. Evan is the founder of Cain and Abel Fitness. Evan, do you want to just share with our listeners a little bit about yourself and your story and how you ended up founding this organization?
Yeah, I'll keep it nice and brief. So back in 2014, I was afflicted with Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy. So I very quickly lost most of my sight. Went on to get my master's in kinesiology and did a lot of disability studies at the same time. And I was actually just reminiscing about this with one of my best friends who was there for this incident. But I kept getting different people approaching me at the gym saying I'm an inspiration, all that stuff. And then one guy was really, really weird about it. And he came up after I did like a really big lift and was like, "Oh, you're really inspiring for us. You know, a lot of us talk about you. And it's just great that you're in this building." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, it's great that you can like be at the gym." I was like, "I just did some other stuff." And I was like, "Man, if I'm being treated like this, where it's just like this weird participation trophy because I was able to be in the building with weights and workout equipment, that was enough." I was like, "Oh man, if I'm being treated like this and I have all these accreditations and stuff, then how bad is it for everybody else?" So I founded Cain and Abel Fitness, CANE and ABLE, to show that even if you have a white cane or vision loss, that you're still able to do stuff no matter what the rest of society may say. So I've been able to do some fun stuff with that, get to do seminars, keynote speeches, remote coaching, strength conditioning for blind sports teams, one-on-one coaching remotely for people around the world, all kinds of stuff, and get to work with some really wonderful people. And then I try to walk the walk by doing stuff myself. So I compete in strongman still, and back in November was able to win the Adaptive Strength World Championships. So I just got the title of World's Strongest Disabled Man, which is fun.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So you were doing this before you lost your vision?
I wasn't doing strongman. I was basically just very into generally CrossFit and stuff like that.
Okay.
And then in my gap year between my bachelor's and my master's, I lost most of my vision, and then it kind of got more specialized from there.
Okay. So it's fitness, at least to a certain extent, maybe in different ways, but has been a part of your life. And then, as you just described, you decided to make that also your work in helping others. What do you think? Obviously, strength training, we want to develop strength. But what do you think strength training gives people besides strong muscles?
I think confidence is a really big part of it. Being able to be a little bit more muscled out, know your capabilities. Those kind of things are really important. I've lived in some very rough neighborhoods where people are like, don't get mugged. And, nobody ever tried because of, luckily how I'm built and how I carry myself. Mm-hmm. But then the whole, where we just approached or just got past New Year's, the whole goal setting and achievement aspect of the gym is really great. A lot of people go for the endorphins and they just kind of run around doing stuff. But when you start like running a program and you're like, okay, I want to be able to, like, I can bench 105 pounds right now. I want to be able to bench 125. And you run, an 8-week program with these progressions and you know where you're going. And then at the end of that 8 weeks, you accomplish that goal through hard work. I think there's a lot of really great lessons that then transfer over to the rest of life as well.
Yeah, and just feeling that sense of accomplishment in one area definitely can transfer to another. And you mentioned, starting the new year. We're actually recording this not long after the new year, but you'll be listening to it at the end of March. So you may still be doing on track with your goals, but you may have given up. And for folks that maybe started out thinking they wanted to do more with fitness, maybe wanted to go to the gym, and they just haven't kept up with it. What encouragement can you give them that it's fine to restart and to try again?
Yeah, it is kind of a big pet peeve of mine where, everybody gets into the gym for the first 2 weeks of January, or, the diet starts on Monday. But always just keep in mind, a lot of people will fail on their goals or feel like they let themselves down when it comes to late March. But statistically, that's very likely. But that doesn't mean that, just like with blindness and most of us being sedentary statistically, that we have to be in that majority of the statistic. Instead, you as an individual get to take ownership and accountability for what you're doing, and you get to turn that around. It doesn't matter if it's Monday or the new year or any other time of the year or the week. So what a lot of people fall short on is that they don't set a proper goal. I'm really big on doing SMART goals where they're specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And then also putting in place some different habits to make sure that they're able to do that. A big example that popped into my head was I had to know how to get to the gym when I lived in the snow in Alaska. Obviously I don't drive and I'm not going to spend an arm and a leg on taxis, but a big thing I practiced when my mom was there to support me was practicing walking to the gym and walking back from the gym and knowing my route. Because if I was going to head out the door and, have all my lifting stuff and everything, I'm like, I don't know how to get there, then that's going to be a system that really fell short on me. So those little logistics and stuff that we have to think about with vision loss, thinking about that and having a plan to make it easier to then get working on our goals is a really big step as well.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about blind or folks that have low vision going to the gym and being in the gym? You gave the example of what you experienced, of people just thought you were amazing because you walked in the door and were using a machine. But apart from that, what do you find is the biggest misconception?
That's a really good question. The first thing that pops into mind is probably not the biggest one, but I think it's a very silly one to knock out early, is a lot of people go to the gym to work on their aesthetics and to look better. And if they are like, well, you can't see yourself in the mirror, then they go, then why should you work out? And that's obviously a very silly reason. We can work out for all kinds of other reasons than just looking good for ourselves in the mirror or for other people. Another big thing is, once the word got out in my small town that I had a visual impairment, all of a sudden I went from 3 weeks earlier being considered a local expert. I was the most accredited person in the region and, referred to as that, to all of a sudden, oh, should he even be in the gym? Is that safe? Should he be around? Where the question's being asked around town.
Wow.
It's very silly when people mistake a disability for complete inability.
Right. Because obviously you didn't lose all that previous experience that you had and all that previous knowledge. It was just adapting to the vision loss.
Yeah, and it was a big blessing because I was forced to learn in different ways, which really deepened my understanding of things as well.
Mm-hmm. So for a person that's really just starting from zero, they have vision loss, but maybe they weren't really even exercising or doing that much. They weren't going to a gym prior to that. What do you think is the best way to begin, or the simplest way for someone to begin?
Yeah, I would say start small. That's a really big thing. Currently, I know we're recording this in January, but I started off the year with a 100 stair challenge for people to just be able to do at home even. So during Blindness Awareness Month in October, there were so many posts I came across where people were talking about just how scary and terrible stairs are for them with vision loss, which is very understandable. But then I think I'm blessed in the way that I tend to overthink things. I had a biomechanics background, all these other, credentials, I guess, that mean I overthink everything when it comes to human movement in the body. And realized that I started making different systems when it came to using stairs with or without a cane, with or without shoes, that could be very helpful for just the entire blind community in order to overcome those things. So if something as simple as stairs is scaring you, that's really stealing away from your energy to be able to do other things as well. So being able to conquer that and then move on from there is really important. So we did a stairs conquered video to start off the new year for people to be able to refer to all these different techniques, exercises, approaches to be able to do a really good job on stairs. And then again, starting small with 100 stairs a day might seem very trivial, but if you're putting a lot of intent into that, you're going to get a lot out of it. And then within those 30 days, you will have climbed higher than the world's tallest building. So approaches like that can be really helpful. Another resource we have on our website is the free gym acclimation program, where I boil down the gym to just its essential parts and have these independence building tasks built in. And it's 2 days a week for 3 weeks, gently being able to ease people into a gym setting, because I've noticed a lot of people with visual impairments, or, again, with New Year's, there's a lot of people who are new to the gym who get very overwhelmed as well. That's the big issue, is thinking about everything in the gym. And when you have vision loss, it's even more confusing and terrifying. But you don't need to know where everything is on day one. We just have to gently start exploring. So focusing on just a few things at a time, getting comfortable with those and those systems, and then branching out from there is a really great way to do it. An example too is when I'm traveling, it's just like, I know, doing consulting work and stuff, I make sure to stop at gyms, make sure to get done what I need to. I don't need to get a tour of the entire gym and memorize everything. It's, what do I have today? What's the important thing for today? Find that equipment, go from there, instead of getting overwhelmed by everything. Because again, that is such a huge mental load. I really want the stress of the gym to be the exercise and not everything else.
And for folks that are maybe not sure about going to the gym and think, well, maybe I can work out at home and have equipment at home. Obviously, some of the equipment we would find in a gym is much larger and more expensive than the majority of us would be able to have in our home. But what do you see as the advantages of going to the gym versus working out at home?
The socialization aspect is huge. I have met some of my best friends at the gym, or deep in relationships with my loved ones at the gym. The story I told earlier about somebody thinking it was great, I was just in the building. I was training that day with my training partner who he had known my sister at that school and everything, and knew that I might wind up being around. I was into lifting and stuff. But there was one day I was patting around everywhere trying to find some 2.5 pound plates. It was a struggle. And I got to even tell this story at his wedding that I was in as a groomsman. He all of a sudden came out of nowhere and was like, "Hey man, you looking for something? Can I help you?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, I'm trying to find 2.5 pound plates somewhere in this gym." And he's like, "Hold on, I got them." And then he came right back with them, and we wound up hanging out together at the gym for 3 hours that day, another 2 hours at my place. And it turned out he lived a block away. We were able to have a really great friendship, and I was messaging him right before we got on this podcast, actually. So there's some just really special relationships you can have by being present and social. And especially in a space where everyone in some way, shape, or form is trying to get better. So I think that can really help with is people having a positive mindset and really trying to better themselves, and being in that community is very, very important. It's also really important for orientation and mobility. Being able to get used to that stuff is huge. And then I always, I know a lot in the vision loss community, we can have a lot of gripes about the public and them getting in our way and all this stuff. And just going down the sidewalk or being at a restaurant and all that, that's one thing to have these, silly slights against us or annoyances. But when you're at the gym, you're like, okay, at least I'm in a place to blow off that steam, and I'm in this space enduring somebody's gym bag in their way or something like that, and I'm still getting better. So at least I'm definitely getting something out of pushing myself, from outside the house here.
Yeah, and just even to get encouragement from other people that you're working out with can be a big thing, so that you keep going and don't gradually, stop. That can be easy, I think, when you work out at home. I think a common question people often have is, how often is enough to make progress?
Really good question. So if you go from 0 to 100, the wheels are probably going to fall off. And we do run into a big issue of people going to the gym too often for too long, especially when they're just starting out. And the way I see it is like, if you can get a lot out of a little, you might as well do that. That'd be far better for you.
Mm-hmm.
There's no use in, like the metaphor would be like spending more money on something, and just telling the cashier, hey, keep it 20. And they're like, it only costs $2. And you're like, keep it. It's fine. Instead, if you can get an awful lot out of just 2 workouts a week and they only take 30, 40 minutes and that's all, especially with thinking about transportation to a gym and everything like that, it's like, hey, might as well do that. And then when you kind of top off of that, that's when it's maybe time to add a little bit more, dial in your program or something like that. But again, if you're going from nothing or very little to a bit of something, you're going to get so many results out of just that.
Of that. Well, and just the focus, if you're beginning, the consistency, the form, intensity. It sounds like maybe the intensity is not the first thing that you do, but being consistent and having good form might be priorities before you try to really increase your intensity.
Definitely. I'm at a pretty high level at this point, and I do that same thing. So there was 2 movements I added into my workout yesterday in order to have better shoulder health and stuff, because I've had some different issues and, kind of got to keep the balance right. And luckily, I'm getting a little older and a little wiser, and I only did very lightweight, very low reps, just reintroducing those things, because it's when you have that really big novel stimulus. Like when people go to the gym and they do 50 squats and a bunch of lunges and all that stuff, and they can't walk for a week. That's something we can dodge by, like you said, keeping that intensity down a little bit and then just easing the body into that.
Well, and I found myself there are days that I can exercise and I could do the exact same movement and the exact same exercise. But as you mentioned with doing the stairs, how intentional you are, how much intensity you put into that, that same exercise can be very challenging one day, and it can be a more low intensity on another day, just learning to be able to regulate that.
Yeah, and I think, again, there's a life lesson there. You make a good point of there's going to be good days and bad days, and sometimes it's kind of out of your control, or your nervous system ain't, behaving that day, and being able to be more comfortable with those peaks and troughs is okay.
So you had mentioned the video that you have of acclimating to a gym and helping folks be able to do that. What advice do you give folks when they physically in person walk into the gym that first day and interacting with staff?
That's exactly it. I want them to actually interact with the staff. And actually in that program on our website that's free, has accessible PDFs you can download and have all these different things. That's day 0, is being able to walk up and ask for help, because that's okay. I know a lot of people, especially when it's the onset of a disability, aren't okay with asking for help, but that's just going to create some more relationships and a better support system. You're going to feel a lot more comfortable in that area. And then what you can do is you can ask for even like a guided tour in order to check out what all they have. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, like with me, I'm operating in a lot of blurriness and stuff and tapping around with my cane, trying to figure out the right flow and everything. And you're just going to kind of get a big head start on that by being introduced to everything and then being able to pick and choose and narrow things down for yourself. So building those relationships right from the get-go is huge.
And what about safety tips? Maybe they pertain to someone that has vision loss, but even just generally, just safety in the gym?
Yeah, scouting out your environment is really important. And then, I mean, I do entire lectures at conferences about different things like this when it comes to safety and efficacy and things like that. And there's all these tiny little things that you'll start learning because you're present and giving it a go at the gym. But just making sure that you actually own your space. You know, if you're at a squat rack, that's your squat rack. So don't get stuff in the way of yourself and everything. But then there's other more public areas like if there's the turf or the giant dumbbell area or something like that, you have to be a little bit more aware and make sure you get back to your bench where you're doing your dumbbell exercises or something like that. So making sure to kind of keep your area clean so we have less tripping hazards, things like that. Using something like upper body protective technique to make sure you keep your arm out and know where your barbell is in your rack to be able to operate. And then always double checking, like the seats of machines to make sure you're not sitting on anybody's lap, because that'd be socially awkward enough to probably have to switch gyms. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of these are very little things that get built in. There's also making sure you understand form and everything like that with doing your squats right, walking them out enough. And then there's other simple things that when you're putting a squat back or putting your bench back or something like that, I call it the contact and slide method, where if we make horizontal contact with the rack and where those hooks are to catch the bar for us, and then we slide down, that's a much better way to do it. And we can also tactily feel that, and then slide it down to make sure it's secure instead of like just trying to throw it back in or it bounces out or, have some sort of crazy mishap. So there's these little nuances that are very accessible and very much at the ready. It just takes that, like you said, extra level of intentionality that goes a long way.
Do you recommend folks have a spotter? They're lifting weights?
It depends on the exercise. Bench press, a lot of times, yes, if it's going to be a very challenging load or challenging set for you. And then also early on, if you're just learning these different exercises, definitely, because then they're going to be able to give you a lot of feedback, especially when you're just learning to do the exercises. We're just trying to survive. And so you're not able to kind of have a lot of thinking going on. My wife commented that it was, she found it a little bit weird the other day. I was like, yeah, I was able to strain during that rep. I think it was deadlifts the other day. And I was able to think while I was at it too, and just be like, okay, I'm good. I just need to do this and this and this. But especially when we're starting out, it's kind of a shock to the body and the mind. So having somebody else to be able to kind of give us that little bit of a double check can really amplify how fast we progress.
Okay. Well, let's move on to talk about some of the strength training basics. Are there core movements that you would recommend that folks build their strength training around?
Yes, definitely. So these different core movements of some sort of squat. So people imagine sitting down and then back up in a chair. So we can think of that as very functional. And it doesn't have to be with a bar on your back. There's a lot of different variations. Some sort of deadlift or hinge where we're working on picking something up. A lot of people worry about hurting their back, but you're able to build a much stronger, resilient back by practicing that pattern in a very good, safe, technical manner and building up from there. Some sort of overhead press is great, especially in the blind community. We tend to have our hands below our shoulders all the time. So being able to get our scaps and our shoulders sliding and gliding and being able to push things overhead is very good. Plus, it blows up the core as well. Some sort of horizontal press, such as a bench press, something like that, push-ups, anything. Some sort of horizontal pull, where we are rowing something into us. Imagine you have to carry something, and then we're having to pull something toward our chest. That is very good, especially for balancing out the bench press, the push-ups, a lot of things that a lot of people want to go towards. It's going to have some good structural balance with that. And then a vertical pull is important, whether it be a lat pull down, working on your pull-ups, which a lot of people write off that they can do those. But I have a guy who's in his 60s, completely blind, and he does pull-ups, and I think he's at double digits at this point. So definitely doable at any age, and whether we're blind or not. And then there's some other functional things that we can lace in there as well. So it's just some sort of unilateral movement, meaning one-sided, especially for the lower body. So if we think lunges or something, so a lot of people start lunges and they get beyond sore with not that very many reps. That's because we don't do it very often. But we think about it. if we're able to do some really good lunges, we're probably going to be able to walk around and do our O&M a lot better as well. And then one other thing I always like to include is some sort of carry, especially if it taxes your grip. Grip is huge, especially for a white cane user, because that tends to be a limiting factor for us a lot of times, is our ability to have strong enough of a grip for it to endure the trip that we're on. And then, if you think about having to carry the groceries in or something, using your cane, and you have a bunch of groceries on one side of your body, being able to train and be used to that and still walking in a straight line, getting where we need to get, can be incredibly important as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a lot of very practical uses for the skills outside of the gym, definitely. What are the pros and cons of machines versus free weights?
So machines are going to be inherently more stable, but then most of the time they're not going to allow for any little asymmetries that we may have in our bodies. And, no matter what people say, we're never going to be perfectly symmetrical and, not crooked in some way, shape, or form. Especially me with my extreme scoliosis, I always know that something's going to be a little bit different on each side. So being able to get what you can out of a machine that's nice and stable, and you're really allowed to push yourself and your muscles capacities there is important. But then those free weights, you're going to be able to load a lot of those up really well. You're going to be able to move in more degrees of range of motion, and then also have to work those stabilizers and those tiny little muscles that have to take care of you in space, which can really help with balance and things like that. So each definitely have their place. And when I'm writing programs for people with vision loss, I tend to include a mismatch of both.
Okay. Well, and if folks have a coach like yourself, wherever they are, and their coach has vision loss, him or herself, how do you coach form when you're not relying on your vision?
Yeah, so I have a little bit left. I'm very blessed to have that. And what I'll do is I'll have people send videos, and then I'll be able to rewatch them and zoom them in however I need to. And then I've got a trained eye, just a little bit blurry at this point with that. But another way to do it is acting upon what people feel. So those intrinsic tactile sensations of people feeling how a movement is. Oh, that kind of hurts my knees. Where's the tension in this movement? Is like when you're doing like a push-up or something, like, oh, I feel it more in my chest than my triceps, my shoulders. We're able to get an awful lot out of that as well. And then that can also turn into teaching techniques with teaching, especially people with visual impairments, how to tactily feel, some sort of extrinsic force pushing against us versus what we feel within the body, what muscles are, really getting tight, really getting worked, what positions that we're in, and then being able to even turn that into audible cues that can be very helpful for fixing exercises quickly.
Okay. And as people get into working out, how do you know when it's time to increase weight or difficulty?
When it is too darn easy, that's when it's time. So one of my favorite strength coaches says, just very simply, they're like, "What? How do you know how to program?" He's like, "The body needs a strong stimulus to change." Right? I think in many ways, not just with physical development, we can be very resistant to change, and it takes a little bit of nudging. So the body really does need a bit of a foghorn telling you, "Hey, this is a big stimulus. This is something that might happen again, and we need to adapt to it." So just make sure it's strong enough to really elicit the change that you're going for.
And the folks can kind of gauge when they're ready, when they need to increase or when they need to maybe continue on at the level they're at until they're feeling comfortable at that, and then challenge themselves a little bit more.
Yeah, and when we get comfortable, I think like all the different times I was a professor teaching client or future trainers to be trainers, I'd say we need to make sure we have some sort of progress at all times. That needs to be in the program constantly, and you as the trainer can program that, whether it's like 3 sets of 12, going to 3 sets of 13 up to 15. And once you're at 3 sets of 15 at that load, then adding weight and going back to 3 sets of 12 and working your way back up again. Those are different ways that the coach can help with that kind of progress. But then if, you're programming for yourself, something like that, there was always the example of, hey, guys, you can go upstairs to the gym here at this college, and there will be people who just do the circuit of machines, and you can go, hey, what weight do you do and how many reps? And they will know every time they do this workout twice a week for the past 10 years, exactly what weight, exactly what reps, and it's magical how nothing changed. Just because there was no progress built in whatsoever. They know their quote-unquote routine, and they're not getting much out of it anymore. So just that insistence on progress in some way, shape, or form is very, very important.
Yeah, so it's great to celebrate that accomplishment and that milestone, but if it's comfortable, then it's time to move on to the next challenge. Yeah. As we're getting near the end of our time here, I just wanted to mention a couple of things that sometimes people will say that are, I think, are really more myths, that maybe excuses of why they're not working out as well, or maybe going to a gym. Well, I need to be in shape before I start. I need to get myself in a little bit better shape before I actually appear in a gym with other people.
Yeah, that's I think a very silly one. I've had multiple people do that kind of thing, and they're just like, "Oh, people are gonna judge me at the gym or something." It's like, no one cares. They're all there for them. They're not like sitting on a machine just like trying to be judgmental and stuff. Like, you being there and active earns an awful lot of respect. And if you don't get people's respect who are just sitting in the corner judging you, then that's okay. That's not the end of days. At least you're there trying to improve yourself. So yeah, it is very sad when people worry about other people and then therefore rob themselves of the results that they deserve.
Yeah, it's like you said, people don't care, and really, if they're worried about you rather than themselves, they're not there for the right reason either. And we kind of touched on this, about the people thinking, well, if I can't work out every day, or if I can't work out for a certain amount of time, I mean, yeah, 10 minutes probably is not enough. But like you said, you might be able to work out in half an hour. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to spend 3 hours a day in the gym. Or if you can't work out every day, that it still counts. You're still able to make some progress.
Definitely. There's way too many people I've heard who take pride in how long they take at the gym. And then you're actually around them and you're like, oh, you barely work out. Like, this is a social club thing for you, but then you brag about how often you're at the gym. So it's more about what you do as opposed to the amount of time. Absolutely. I like this myths idea. This is great.
Are there any others that you could think of that you've heard?
A big one is, I don't want to get too bulky. That will never happen. And that's something that always bugs me. You're like, okay, I work out all the freaking time and am always trying to pursue this path, and I'm not too bulky. I don't know who you think you are, that you're just magically going to lift a couple of weights and then you're just going to be way too muscly. It's like that. It doesn't just happen. And if it did, good for you. But even Arnold Schwarzenegger was doing 2-a-days and all these different things. So I don't know how you magically think you're going to get way too many muscles. So it almost seems like a weird cop-out to not try because you're scared that you're going to be far too successful, more than anyone has ever been. Another thing is people worrying about, again, getting too big or getting way too tight. But it takes a very, very long time to like get way too much like that. People think about that the old term is muscle bound. And like, so even football players wouldn't lift weights because they were scared that they were going to get way too tight and overly muscular and stuff. But all it did was make them stronger, faster, more capable, and then also durable. I think a huge undervalued part of working out, and especially strength training, is you get to be a little bit tougher. You got a little bit more muscle mass on you. You get to be able to endure the rigors of life or something crazy that happens to you as well. And hopefully it's something as simple as like, a little trip on the sidewalk and a fall, and I get up and I'm good. Just a little bit of scuff mark. But it can be as exaggerated as getting hit by a truck. So a few years ago, I was crossing the street. I got hit by a truck, flew through the air, and I think I was unconscious, and that's why I landed so gracefully on my side and all this stuff. It exploded the protein shake I had in my backpack. I was sad about that. I ended up having to go to the ER and all this stuff. But the people in the ambulance are like, if like we were expecting maybe just a dead body, we were maybe expecting way more broken things on you. Instead, your heart rate is 60 beats per minute, and you were the calmest person out at the accident site. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm used to putting myself through a stimulus and stuff, and I got a lot of adrenaline going right now. They're like, yeah, if you didn't work out and weren't built the way that you are built, you would have been way, way, way worse off. And I wasn't perfect afterwards. It's not just like I completely took it and that was the end of it. But thank goodness I had been working out and trying to build up my body, because whether it was something that extreme or tripping and falling, or if it's something where I know you guys are covering all kinds of cool blind sports, a big one would be like goal ball or beat ball. They are weirdly violent on your body. So being able to be a little bit more muscular
Yes.
and being able to take that can allow you to get out there for just, adventures, being willing to trip on a route while hiking, or, take a goal ball to the chest as well.
Well, and if a person has had an injury, maybe not as severe as being hit by a truck, but if a person has had an injury, or they have, maybe they just have joint issues, arthritis, joint issues, are there low impact workouts that you would recommend for folks, or exercises that they could do to help either in recovery if it's an injury, or just to help with their mobility if they have joint issues?
Definitely. Of course, it's a case-by-case basis, so I can't address too many specific things very well, but
Sure.
There's a lot of things that do definitely get neglected. And then a big thing that comes up a lot is a lot of people with visual impairments are older. So you have macular degeneration or glaucoma or something like that. So you're about retirement age and those eye diseases. And society just says,
Right.
you know what, you're about done. Just sit on the bench, and you let yourself degrade. But instead, there's a lot of really good things that we can do. Like you said, that are low impact, such as balance work, these different single leg positions, like being able to hold a lunge and work on our balance there and build the strength there. I have entire programs for that as well. We have a whole foot strength and balance program up on YouTube for free, with an intro video and then a beginner and then more advanced versions for people to be able to work on that stuff. And then I also sell like a grip program and a fall prevention program online as well. So these are all different ways to slowly stair step people, no matter what level they're at, to being able to do these things. Another thing that comes to mind is like osteoporosis, where you need enough nutrients to be able
Yes.
to rebuild bones properly, but you also need enough of a stimulus to tell those bones to grow. And a lot of times that's what happens with people with all kinds of, like you said, joint issues and things, where it's just like, well, I just need to rest it. But really, there's a lot of more active approaches that are going to lead you to more capability down the road instead of just avoidance.
Yeah, and I think it's important to encourage folks to look at that and do that, because I know I have a friend, she went to the doctor because she was having problems with the knee, and she was an athletic person and used to being able to do all sorts of things, and this was really impacting her activity level. And they said, well, you're just getting older. It's just your knee's old. And she said, I looked at him and said, yeah, but the thing is, my other knee is just as old and it doesn't have that problem. So I think sometimes as we get older that people just think, oh, well, it's just because you're old. But I think continuing to move really can help us stay in less pain and continue to be mobile and not have greater issues.
Absolutely. In the disabled community in general, it's all about adaptations, right? It's doing things differently than completely able-bodied people would do. And we know within our community that those adaptations allow us to not just get by, but to still thrive and be able to do things just fine, just in a slightly different way. So it's funny when it comes to exercise and it's just like, oh, your knee is off. And it's like, just don't do it then. Like you can't. I think that's a very silly mindset when there are a lot of adaptations that we can use. When it comes to knees, I was down teaching a seminar tour in Medellin, Colombia, and there was this wonderful older lady who had issues sitting and standing from a chair. And if something that simple in your day is going to be as painful stress, like what are you going to do? You're just like, I'm just not going to get up. But within 2 minutes, we were able to use those tactile cues, again, things just more accessible for the blind, in order to get her doing a squat the right way that took the tension off of her knees. And so she started doing squats and sitting and standing out of a chair without knee pain and was just completely mind blown by this. So all it was these adaptations that worked for her. And then she was able to, negate that problem and move on with her life. So we always have these adaptations that are possible for us.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really encouraging comment for folks. And also, the thought occurred to me when you mentioned people might be afraid they're going to be too bulked up or too tight. How do you incorporate like stretching and things like that into the workout?
Yeah. I'm not very big on static stretching.
Or is that important?
Yes, it can be. But I think a lot of people can get hyper fixated on it. There is a way,
Okay.
especially if you have a really good and an educated trainer, where they can integrate a lot of that stuff into your workout. So think about like your biceps getting really tight and giving you shoulder problems, and you can't reach back behind you very well, like sweeping back behind your at waist level. There's something called an incline
Yes.
dumbbell curl where you sit back on an incline bench, so your arms with dumbbells in them are kind of dangling in that position behind you and getting a stretch, and then you have to flex the bicep and do your curl. So just by that modification of making that exercise harder and in a more stretch range of motion, we can make sure your body's still able to operate there so it doesn't shut down that range of motion. So by integrating these little different capacities within the same exercise, we can really elegantly build that into a program really nicely. Another thing will be like if you have really tight knees or hamstrings or something, progressing safely to a good deep lunge position can really help open that stuff up and build the strength in those positions for the long run too.
Well, and that seems like that would make your whole workout more efficient if it was incorporated together instead of being a totally separate aspect.
Exactly. You totally get it. If it's hard to build, any workouts into your day, might as well be efficient.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for all these great tips that you've given us. Evan, do you have any final words or encouragements for our listeners?
Yeah, I know that I can definitely be long-winded. I obviously have a passion for this stuff, and it definitely pretty much all I do. So I am constantly trying to provide little tips and tricks and stuff. So of course, like I say, don't get overwhelmed by the gym, and then I can lecture all day on this stuff. So if anybody's getting overwhelmed by just how many words or different things I'm throwing out there, it's just to give more options and considerations. But it all boils down to what works for you. I'm going to keep throwing stuff out on social media and YouTube and my website and all these different things, but it's all about finding resources that allow you to just unlock your potential and get some positive momentum. So you don't have to take into mind everything that I said during this or anything else. But just take, those few little tidbits that allow you to get that positive momentum again and get things rolling. And then things are just going to get better for you from there. A lot of people figure out that, trying to go all in 5 days a week for an hour come New Year's isn't sustainable. So whatever's sustainable for you is what is necessary. And then if you need any help, absolutely feel free to reach out.
And where can folks find you in Cane Enable
Yeah,
Fitness?
I am Cane Enable Fitness. Again, spelled weird. CANEANDABLE Fitness on all platforms. So I have Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. It's canenablefitness@gmail.com, and our website is canenablefitness.com.
Great. Well, thank you again. Hopefully, this will inspire folks to get out there and get moving and exercising and not be intimidated to go to the gym and get in better shape, but also maybe make some new friends.
Absolutely. There's a lot of results that our community deserves to have, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what people get out of it.
Well, thank you to our listeners for joining us for this episode of NLVL. I hope the information Evan has given us today will help you navigate your life with vision loss.
If AfterSight podcasts are part of your week, donate today at aftersight.org/donate. AfterSight is a nonprofit, and your support keeps these programs on the air and expands access for people who are blind, have low vision, or need other access to print. Be the reason someone discovers AfterSight this week.